Hello, my name is Harrison Midkiff, and I'm a federal sales engineer with Logarithm. Today what I wanted to do is a short demonstration on Logarithm's ability to be able to quarantine and sandbox an endpoint on your network. Now, why is this important to be able to quarantine or sandbox an endpoint on your network? In many cases, if you have a host which is demonstrating compromised activity, you don't necessarily want to disable that system or completely knock it off the network. You'll want to take that system and move it into a quarantined sandbox section of your network, such as a gray network where it is possible to be able to do more forensics analysis against that particular endpoint. So what's the use case and how am I going to demonstrate this to you here today? Well, here what I have is I have a typical user which is going to log onto a server. Now, when a user logs onto a server, it's usually a privileged user access of a system. When that happens, right out of the box, you should be receiving alerts letting you know that your users are accessing sensitive servers. This isn't necessarily that they're doing anything wrong, but this is just our ability that we want to be able to know who's accessing different systems on the network. This is also helpful to us in case somebody's credentials are compromised. With many of your users having domain admin privileges, this is a very important thing to be able to monitor for. Now, for detecting if a host is being compromised, we're also looking for other activities to happen in conjunction with a logon to the system. Right after a user logs on, we can also have things like a restricted process is launched on the system. In addition to that, we could demonstrate or detect hacking tool activity happening on the network as well, on that particular host as well. Those three things all coming together basically let us know that now the host has been compromised. Once the host has been compromised, now we need to do something with it. Well, shutting the host down just basically remediates this thing and stops it from happening. But with today's cyber threats that we're experiencing and the sensitive nature of your environment, it's not enough necessarily to throw this off the network, but we need to be able to understand everything that it's done. This is where Logarithm's ability to be able to do a smart response will allow us to run a executable against the system, and basically what it will let the cybersecurity analyst do is quarantine or sandbox the endpoint in just a matter of a few seconds, so now our analyst can jump in and do more forensic analysis against it. So what are the rules that Logarithm brings in order to be able to do this? In order to be able to do this, what we're basically doing is we're using a compound type rule. What we're doing is we're looking for multiple different types of activity. We're looking for restricted process execution. We're looking for privileged user logs in, and we're also even looking for restricted processes or hacking tools that could be being executed on the system as well. Well, the first part of this is restricted processes that are running on the system. A restricted process that's running on this system could be denoted as something as notepad.exe that's running on it, but it's an executable we've identified that is a restricted process that shouldn't be running on the system. In addition to that, we also want to be able to monitor what users are logging into the system as well. In order to be able to do this, what Logarithm does is Logarithm gives us the ability to be able to monitor users' access. Well, we don't want to necessarily add all our individual users in. Logarithm gives us the ability to create lists. When we use a list, we can monitor individual users, and we can even monitor our Active Directory groups for users to see when these people are logging in. Well, in addition to that, we can also look for hacking tool activity as well. In this case, hacking tool activity is being identified as the exe of beartail.exe and even the executable as 7zip.exe being executed on the system as well. So all of these things that come together for us actually indicate that we have compromise happening on a system. Okay? Once that compromise happens, then Logarithm jumps in with its ability to be able to launch a smart response action against the solution. When the smart response action is launched, basically what we're doing in this particular case is we are changing the IP address of the system in order to be able to move it into that quarantine sandbox or that gray network that you might have. You can see right down here at the bottom, this is being achieved by using a PowerShell command which is changing the IP address on the system to a .15 IP. And we're going to see that inside the demonstration. Now, how is the host going to be moved? Basically, what we're going to see is the host will be operating normally in its production network, and then all of a sudden it becomes compromised, and then when the smart response action runs against it, then that device will be moved to the quarantine sandboxed VLAN, where now we'll be able to do more analysis against that particular device. So enough with our PowerPoint. Let's jump in and let's take a look at this, and let's see how Logarithm can do this. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the web UI. The web UI is where my cybersecurity analyst is going to be able to do all of his day-to-day work. Here I can see messages per second coming into it. I can see the classifications of all the logs that they've been processed through it. And at any point, if I ever wanted to see my log messages, all I have to do is click at the bottom to pull all the logs up, and I can even display the raw log message that I would have for any of the messages that are coming in. Well, what I'm interested in looking at right now is I'm interested in the alarms, because this is, when I launch this, this is going to cause some alarms. I'm looking at my alarms, and I'm looking at them in the last 24 hours. I'm also can come over here, and if I want to, I could sort my alarms. So I can look at 50 and above alarms, 70 and above alarms, 90 and above alarms as well. My alarms come in with a risk prioritization value. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort this, and I'm going to say, let's look at all the alarms that have been coming in the last 10 minutes. So I'm just going to hit select on that, and we'll sort this based on the alarms in the last 10 minutes. So when I perform this activity, we'll be able to see these alarms kick off. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to a VM environment in order to be able to demonstrate this. Now, the first thing I have is right here on the right side of the screen is I have the host that I'm going to be logging in on. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send it a Control-Delete, and I'm going to log in as a user here called Freddy. So let's go ahead and let's log in as him. Get the password in here. And I'm logging in as the user Freddy. Now, the IP of this system right here is 10.255.255.12. What I'm going to do while we go through this demonstration is I'm going to ping that IP address, because that's the active IP address of this system where the user is working. Well, let's go back over here and let's take a look at our alarms and see if we get anything interesting over here. Well, all of a sudden I have an alarm come in, and it says suspicious login, IRAD privileged user access. I click on the alarms to look at the details for it, and if I look at the details on it, I can see this is my server called engineering, and there's the user Freddy that just logged into it. Well, right away, what I want to do is I need to be able to track access against this. So what I can do is I can create a case to start to track this access. So I'm just going to come over here and we'll give it a name, and we'll put demo on here, and we'll just type in compromised host. I can put a priority level on here if I want to. I can put a due date, and I can even put summary notes on here. But you can see what I'm doing here is I'm creating a case on the fly for this. Now, my user, Freddy, didn't do anything wrong. He just logged into a server. In order for us to determine that this is a compromised host, we have to have a series of things happen. So in rapid succession, all of a sudden, a unknown or normally restricted process is run on the system. In this case, it's Notepad. And then in addition to that, I have a couple of executables that run, and these are executables that hackers are known to use. And the two I'm using here are 7-Zip and Beartail, which are common tools that hackers like to run. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to look at the screen. And we're going to see if we get any more alarms associated with this activity. Well, I have one right here, restricted process execution that was run. And restricted process execution, if I come over here and I take a look at it, you can see it's Notepad that just ran on it. But then all of a sudden, right behind that, I have a couple of more messages that came in. There's another restricted process execution right here. This is my hacking tool type activity. There's 7-Zip that was launched. And then I have another one, restricted process execution, which is the Beartail that was run on that one. And then that in turn sets off my server compromised rule. So now all this activity coming together in a short period of time sets off the main rule, which is the server now has been compromised. Well, as part of this, I have the ability to be able to do a smart response against this. Okay, when I launch the smart response, For me to launch the smart response as the analyst, all I have to do is click this approve button right here, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to change the IP address on the system, and it's going to move it to the quarantine. So let's go ahead and let's hit approve on that, and let's come back over here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to ping the IP address of where it's going to be quarantined to, and we're going to watch what happens. The smart response is launching on a PowerShell against the system. It is now taking the IP address and it's going to change it from its .12 IP address, and it's going to move it over to a .15, which will be able to take it and put it into a quarantine, a sandbox, or a gray network. Once it gets in that network, then what will happen is the security analyst will be able to jump in on the system. The malware or whatever is running on it will still think it's working properly and still think it's communicating. And so now we'll have a chance to be able to see the full scope of what this is. And then also what we'll be able to do is take any additional remediation steps that we might need to take. If I open this up and I take a look at this, you can see right here under change adapter settings right here, we can actually see the IP address that it put it on. And if I take a look right here, the IP address that it put it on is the 10.255.255.15. So now the host has effectively been quarantined. Anyways, I hope you found this short presentation on LockheedDemo's ability to be able to quarantine, sandbox, or put a system into a gray network for an analyst to be able to do further analysis against it. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.